The waiter approaches with the leather check folder, his eyes scanning our table of 12 family members celebrating my sister Sarah's 25th birthday at the upscale steakhouse. Mom has just finished her toast, declaring Sarah, "the daughter I'm proud of," while I sat there forcing a smile. The waiter sets the $3,470 bill directly in front of me, not Mom, who organized this entire celebration. Sarah smirks knowingly across the table. Everyone watches expectantly. I stand up slowly and slide the bill right back to where it belongs. 3 days before this disaster, my phone buzzed while I was debugging code at my software engineering job. Mom's name flashed across the screen, which immediately put me on edge. Linda Morrison only called when she needed something, and her timing was always impeccable, right when I was swamped with deadlines. "Christian, honey, I need you to clear your calendar for Saturday evening," she announced without any pleasantries. "Sarah's turning 25 and I'm organizing something special at Morton's Steakhouse downtown. Just intimate family, nothing crazy." I should have caught the warning signs right there. Mom never organized anything intimate, and Morton's was definitely not casual dining. But I'd been working 60-hour weeks for the past month, and part of me actually welcomed the idea of family time that didn't revolve around crisis management. "Sure, Mom. What time should I be there?" 7 sharp. "And Christian." Her voice took on that particular tone I'd learned to dread over my 32 years of life. "This is really important to me. I want to show both my children how much I appreciate them." Both children. That phrase should have been my second red flag. In our family dynamic, there had never been equal appreciation. Sarah had always been the golden child. Creative, spontaneous, free-spirited. I was the practical one, the problem solver, the backup plan, when Sarah's artistic pursuits inevitably crashed into financial reality. The pattern had started early. While Sarah took dance classes, art camps, and theater workshops throughout our childhood, I mowed lawns and delivered newspapers to buy my own school supplies. When Sarah needed help with college applications, I spent my weekends writing her essays. When she dropped out junior year to pursue acting, I was the one who convinced our parents not to cut her off completely. Now at 25, Sarah was still finding herself in the entertainment industry. She'd never held a steady job longer than 6 months, bouncing between coffee shops, retail stores, and brief stints as a restaurant server. Her acting career consisted mainly of unpaid community theater and student films that never saw distribution. Meanwhile, I'd built a solid career in software development, earned a decent salary, and maintained financial stability that our family had come to depend on more than I cared to admit. Over the past 7 years, I'd quietly covered Sarah's acting class fees when she couldn't afford them. I'd paid for Mom's car repairs when her teacher's salary fell short. I'd even covered 2 months of Sarah's rent when she got evicted from her apartment in the arts district. Each time, the family treated these contributions like natural obligations rather than generous gestures. Mom would call with updates on Sarah's latest breakthrough opportunity and casually mention the associated costs. Sarah would text me links to expensive workshops or headshot photographers with heart emojis and please, please, please messages. And somehow I always found myself transferring money while telling myself it was temporary support. But Saturday felt different when I arrived at Morton's. The hostess led me through the dimly lit restaurant, past tables of well-dressed couples and business dinners, toward a large corner table. The first surprise was the guest list. This wasn't the intimate gathering Mom had described. Sarah sat at the head of the table like a queen holding court, wearing a black dress that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Her boyfriend, Derek, lounged beside her, his arm draped possessively across the back of her chair. Derek had appeared in Sarah's life 6 months ago, a wannabe musician who talked constantly about his connections in the industry while working part-time at a music store. Mom had invited her sister Patricia and brother-in-law Mark, along with their 2 adult children, Casey and Brian. Both cousins were in their late 20s with steady jobs and mortgages, people I rarely saw except at major holidays. Sarah's best friend Amanda sat across from her boyfriend Tyler, both looking slightly overwhelmed by the upscale atmosphere. The second surprise was the restaurant itself. Morton's wasn't just expensive, it was legitimately high-end dining. Thick steaks aged to perfection wine lists, with bottles costing more than my car payment servers, who knew how to make you feel like royalty while they expertly separated you from significant amounts of money. Christian. Mom jumped up from her seat, wrapping me in an enthusiastic hug that felt performative rather than genuine. You look wonderful, honey. Sit right there next to Patricia. As I settled into my chair, I noticed how everyone had positioned themselves around the table. Sarah commanded attention at the head. Mom sat to her right, like a devoted courtier, and Derek held the left side. The rest of us formed an audience arranged to worship at the altar of Sarah's birthday celebration. "So good to see you, Christian," Patricia said warmly. She'd always been the level-headed sister working as a nurse practitioner while raising two kids and maintaining realistic expectations about life. "Mark was just saying we don't get together enough outside of Christmas and Easter." Mark nodded, reaching across to shake my hand. "How's the tech world treating you? Still working on those financial software systems?" "Actually, I've moved into cybersecurity consulting." I started to explain, but Mom's voice immediately cut through our conversation. "Sarah, tell everyone about your callback audition next week. She's being considered for a supporting role in an independent film that's getting serious attention from distributors." I watched my sister's face light up as she launched into a detailed description of an audition that sounded suspiciously similar to the breakthrough opportunities she'd been describing for years. Derek nodded along, enthusiastically adding embellishments about directors he claimed to know personally. The server approached our table with practiced professionalism, clearly accustomed to handling large groups at expensive establishments. As he distributed leather-bound menus, I started doing mental math. Appetizers ranged from $28 to $45. Entrees began at $52 and climbed toward triple digits for premium selections. "Let's start with champagne," Mom announced with theatrical flair. "Dom Perignon, I think. We're celebrating my beautiful daughter's 25th birthday." I watched the server nod and disappear toward the bar, knowing that single bottle would cost more than most people spent on groceries in a week. Around the table, everyone seemed to be settling in for an evening of indulgence, studying menus with the enthusiasm of people who weren't planning to pay for their selections. "Christian," Casey addressed me while examining the wine list. "Mom mentioned you've been doing really well financially. That must feel great having that kind of security." Something about his phrasing felt off, too deliberate and leading. I glanced at Mom, who was deep in conversation with Sarah about the perfect lighting for birthday photos, but I caught the slight tension in her shoulders that suggested she was monitoring multiple conversations simultaneously. "I do okay," I replied carefully. "Tech pays well if you're willing to put in the hours and keep your skills current." "That's so smart," Amanda chimed in. "Sarah always talks about how responsible you are with money. She says you've really got your life figured out." Again, the phrasing felt strange. Sarah rarely discussed my financial responsibility unless she needed something, and Amanda's tone carried an undertone of preparation, like she was building toward a specific point. The champagne arrived with ceremonial presentation, and Mom insisted on an immediate toast. "To my darling Sarah, who brings joy and creativity to everyone around her. 25 years of making the world more beautiful." We raised our glasses while Sarah basked in the attention, but I noticed Derek filming the moment on his phone, capturing every angle like he was documenting evidence for future reference. As we returned to our menus, I overheard Sarah whisper to Derek, "Don't worry, Christian always picks up the tab. Mom trained him well." My blood chilled. The comment was casual throwaway delivered with the confidence of someone stating an obvious fact. I stared at my menu while my mind raced, suddenly viewing the entire evening through a different lens. The expensive restaurant choice, the expanded guest list, the champagne order. None of it felt coincidental anymore. I told myself I'd misheard Sarah's comment, trying to focus on the menu while my stomach churned with growing unease. Maybe she was joking, or maybe Derek had been asking about something completely different. But as the evening progressed, subtle details began forming a disturbing pattern. The server returned for appetizer orders, and suddenly everyone's inhibitions about price disappeared completely. Patricia ordered the lobster cocktail at $42. Mark chose the Wagyu beef sliders for $38. Casey and Brian both selected the oyster platter to share, which cost $65. Even Amanda, who'd seemed nervous about the upscale atmosphere, ordered the seared foie gras after Sarah insisted she had to try it. "We'll take 3 bottles of the Caymus Cabernet," Mom announced without consulting anyone. "The 2019 vintage." I quickly located the wine on the list. $128 per bottle. 3 bottles meant nearly $400 just for wine to accompany appetizers. My mental calculator was working overtime, and the numbers were becoming genuinely frightening. Sarah ordered like she was conducting a symphony of excess. "I'll start with the tuna tartare and the burrata plate. For my main course, I want the dry-aged ribeye medium rare with the lobster tail edition. And can you make sure the truffle butter is extra generous?" Her entree alone cost $147, not including sides or the lobster supplement. Derek followed her lead with similar enthusiasm, ordering the tomahawk steak that cost $162, plus appetizers and additional wine pairings. "This is incredible," Tyler whispered to Amanda, clearly overwhelmed by the surroundings. "I've never been anywhere this fancy." Sarah wanted Christian to experience fine dining too, Amanda replied loud enough for me to hear. She said he works so hard he deserves something special. That comment made my chest tighten. When had I become the guest of honor at Sarah's birthday dinner? And why was everyone talking about what I deserved rather than celebrating the actual birthday girl? The server kept making eye contact with me whenever expensive additions were mentioned, as if seeking approval for each escalating charge. When Derek asked about the wine cellar's reserve selections, the server looked directly at me while explaining the premium options. When Patricia inquired about dessert pairings again, the server's gaze found mine. "So Christian," Mark said during a lull in conversation, "what's your take on the current tech market? Casey's been thinking about making a career change into software development." I was grateful for normal conversation that didn't revolve around Sarah's acting aspirations or my apparent role as evening sponsor. "It's competitive but stable if you can adapt to changing technologies. The cybersecurity side especially has strong growth potential." "That sounds fascinating," Patricia said. "You must be doing really well to afford a place like this for family celebrations." Wait, I set down my wine glass carefully, trying to process her assumption. "Actually, I didn't choose the restaurant. Mom made the reservation and—" "Oh, Christian's being modest," Mom interrupted with a laugh that sounded forced. "He's always been generous with family. Remember when he paid for Sarah's acting workshop intensive last summer?" "And the headshot session," Sarah added, with theatrical gratitude. "Christian really believes in supporting artistic dreams." Suddenly, everyone was looking at me with expressions of appreciation and expectation that made my skin crawl. I hadn't volunteered to fund anyone's artistic dreams. I'd been emotionally manipulated into covering emergency expenses that were presented as temporary family assistance. "That's really wonderful," Casey said. "It's rare to see siblings support each other like that." Brian nodded in agreement. "Most people our age are too focused on themselves to help family members pursue creative careers." The conversation was spinning beyond my control, creating a narrative where I was the designated family benefactor who regularly funded Sarah's lifestyle, by choice rather than manipulation. Around the table, everyone seemed to have bought into this fiction completely. "Christian understands what family means." Mom continued, her voice carrying an undertone of expectation disguised as praise. "He knows that success isn't worth much if you don't share it with the people you love." Derek raised his wine glass toward me in a mock toast. Here's to big brothers who understand the value of investing in artistic talent. The word investing hit me like a physical blow. I wasn't investing in anything. I was being systematically drained by people who'd learned exactly which emotional buttons to push to access my bank account. When the server brought the second course, I excused myself to visit the restroom, desperate for a moment to collect my thoughts. The hallway outside the dining room was quieter, decorated with dark wood paneling and vintage photographs of the restaurant's history. As I walked toward the restroom, I heard Mom's voice coming from around the corner near the coat check area. She was on her phone speaking in low tones that carried clearly in the empty corridor. Yes, he'll pay it. He always does. Sarah deserves this celebration and Christian has the money. I froze against the wall, listening to my own mother confirm my worst suspicions. I know it's expensive, but this is important. Sarah's moving to Los Angeles next month for her career, and we need to show her how much the family supports her dreams. Christian will understand. Los Angeles next month. This was the first I'd heard about any move, and the way Mom was discussing it suggested major financial implications that somehow involved me. Don't worry about the cost. Christian makes good money and he's not married, no kids. He can afford to help family when it matters. The casual dismissal of my own financial goals and priorities was breathtaking. In Mom's calculation, my single status meant my money was available for family redistribution rather than my own life planning. I returned to the table feeling like I was walking into a trap that had been carefully constructed around me. The main courses were arriving with theatrical presentation. Massive steaks, elaborate seafood towers, side dishes that cost more than entire meals at normal restaurants. But now I was watching everything through the lens of Mom's phone conversation. This wasn't a birthday celebration. It was a shakedown disguised as family bonding with me, cast as the unwitting sponsor of Sarah's expensive farewell dinner before her mysterious Los Angeles adventure. The server approached with another bottle of wine, looking expectantly in my direction for approval. Mom smiled encouragingly. Sarah raised her glass for another toast. Derek's phone remained ready to capture every moment of my anticipated compliance. And I realized that everyone at this table except me knew exactly how this evening was supposed to end. The main courses arrived with presentation that belonged in food magazines rather than real dining experiences. Sarah's dry-aged ribeye came garnished with microgreens and truffle shavings that probably cost more per ounce than gold. Derek's tomahawk steak required its own serving platter accompanied by roasted bone marrow and exotic mushroom varieties I couldn't pronounce. I'd ordered the most modest option I could find, a simple grilled salmon. But even that came with lobster risotto and seasonal vegetables prepared with techniques that justified the $78 price tag. Around the table, everyone attacked their expensive entrees with enthusiasm that felt increasingly performative. "This is absolutely incredible," Amanda gushed, cutting into her lamb rack. "Sarah, your family really knows how to celebrate properly." "My family knows how to appreciate special occasions," Sarah replied with meaningful eye contact in my direction. "Some people understand that money is just a tool for creating memories." That comment stung because it twisted my practical approach to finances into something selfish and small-minded. I'd worked hard to build financial security, not because I was obsessed with money itself, but because I'd grown up watching our parents struggle with unexpected expenses and wanted stability. Christians learned that lesson well. Mom added cutting her filet mignon into precise bites. He knows that helping family is more important than hoarding wealth. Hoarding wealth, as if maintaining an emergency fund and retirement savings was some kind of character flaw, rather than basic financial responsibility. Derek leaned back in his chair with the confidence of someone who'd never paid for his own expensive meal. It's refreshing to meet people who aren't obsessed with keeping score in relationships. Real family supports each other without tracking every dollar. The hypocrisy was stunning. Derek was talking about not keeping score while actively participating in an evening designed to separate me from thousands of dollars I'd never agreed to spend. "Absolutely," Brian agreed, raising his wine glass. Money comes and goes, but family is forever. Easy words from someone who wasn't being positioned as the evening's designated payer. I watched my cousins enjoy their expensive meals while discussing the meaninglessness of money, apparently oblivious to the manipulation happening right in front of them. As we finished the main course, Mom stood up with the theatrical flair she'd perfected during her years teaching high school drama. She tapped her wine glass with her knife, commanding attention from our table and several nearby diners. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced with projection that reached the neighboring tables, "I want to share something important about my beautiful daughter Sarah on this milestone birthday." Sarah's face lit up with anticipation, while Derek immediately started recording with his phone, capturing every angle of what was clearly a planned performance, rather than spontaneous emotion. 25 years ago, I was blessed with a daughter who would teach me everything about creativity, authenticity, and living life with passion. Mom continued, her voice carrying the emotional weight of a prepared speech. "Sarah has never compromised her artistic vision for financial security. She's never sold out her dreams for a conventional career path." Each word felt like a deliberate attack on my life choices, disguised as praise for Sarah's artistic integrity. Mom wasn't just celebrating my sister, she was systematically diminishing my accomplishments by comparison. While other young people chase money and material success, Sarah has remained true to her calling as an artist. She understands that creativity and self-expression are worth more than any bank account. I noticed Patricia shifting uncomfortably in her seat, clearly picking up on the implied criticism of anyone who'd chosen practical career paths. Mark stared at his wine glass, avoiding eye contact with me entirely. "Sarah refuses to conform to society's materialistic expectations," Mom declared with increasing volume and emotion. "She won't sacrifice her artistic temperament for the false security of corporate employment." False security, corporate employment. Mom was describing my career and financial stability like they were moral failings, rather than responsible adult choices. She reminds me every day that real success means staying authentic to yourself, even when the world pressures you to abandon your dreams for money. Around the restaurant, other diners had started glancing toward our table, drawn by Mom's theatrical delivery, an increasingly pointed message about the superiority of artistic pursuits over financial responsibility. "Sarah is the daughter I'm proud of because she's never let practicality kill her spirit or let financial concerns override her commitment to living an authentic life." The words hit me like physical blows. After 32 years of being the responsible child, the problem solver, the family safety net mom, was publicly declaring that my life choices were fundamentally inferior to Sarah's unemployed, artistic wandering. She's taught our entire family about courage, about refusing to settle, about believing that dreams are more valuable than security. Sarah was crying now, overwhelmed by the public validation she'd been craving her entire life. Derek continued filming while Amanda and Tyler looked moved by the emotional display. My cousins applauded politely, clearly uncomfortable with the comparison, but unwilling to challenge Mom's dramatic declaration. So tonight I want everyone to know that Sarah Morrison is the daughter I'm proud of, the daughter who represents everything beautiful about refusing to compromise your authentic self for money. The restaurant erupted in applause from nearby tables who'd been drawn into Mom's performance, thinking they were witnessing a heartwarming family moment rather than a calculated public humiliation designed to justify financial exploitation. Sarah stood up for hugs and congratulations, while I sat frozen in my chair processing the devastating realization that my own mother had just announced to a room full of strangers that my life was essentially worthless compared to my unemployed sister's artistic purity. But as I watched the celebration unfold around me, I noticed Derek wasn't just filming randomly. He was deliberately capturing reaction shots of me zooming in on my face during the most painful moments of Mom's speech, like he was documenting my humiliation for future reference. During the chaos of congratulations and photos, Sarah stepped away from the table to take selfies with Amanda, leaving her phone sitting next to her purse. The screen was still lit up, showing a text message thread that made my blood freeze. The conversation was with Mom, time-stamped throughout the past 3 weeks, showing detailed planning for this entire evening. Message after message about guest lists, restaurant selection, wine choices, and most importantly, strategies for ensuring I would pay the bill without being able to refuse publicly. Remember, if he objects, remind him about family loyalty in front of everyone, one text read. He won't make a scene in public. Another message from Sarah. Derek thinks we should aim for at least $3,000. That should cover dinner, plus set up the expectation for LA moving expenses. $3,000. They hadn't just planned to stick me with an expensive dinner bill. They'd calculated exactly how much they could extract from me in front of family witnesses who would pressure me into compliance. The final text was from this morning. Don't worry, Mom. Christian always breaks when family expectations are involved. Tonight we find out how much he really cares about us. I set the phone down carefully, my hands shaking, as the full scope of their manipulation crystallized into devastating clarity. This wasn't family dysfunction or miscommunication. This was premeditated financial exploitation, disguised as celebration planned weeks in advance and executed with theatrical precision. The revelation from Sarah's phone messages recontextualized everything I'd experienced, not just tonight, but over the past several years. As I sat there processing the evidence of systematic manipulation, memories began surfacing with new, disturbing clarity. 3 months ago, Sarah had called crying about an emergency acting workshop that required immediate payment. She'd sobbed about losing her spot in the program if she couldn't come up with $800 by midnight. I'd transferred the money within an hour, feeling heroic for saving her opportunity. Now I wondered if there had ever been an emergency at all, or if that crisis had been manufactured specifically to test my responsiveness to time pressure. Last Christmas, Mom had organized a small family gathering that somehow expanded to include 15 people for dinner at an expensive restaurant. I'd been the only one surprised by the guest list and the venue choice. Now I realized everyone else had been informed about expectations in advance, leaving me as the designated surprise payer. Sarah's eviction crisis 6 months ago had followed the same pattern. Urgent phone calls, tears, about losing her apartment, family pressure about my responsibility to help. I'd covered 2 months of rent without questioning why Sarah's roommate had suddenly moved out or why the landlord's payment deadline was so inflexible. Even smaller incidents took on new significance. Sarah's frequent lunch dates, where she'd conveniently forget her wallet, Mom's car repairs that needed immediate attention when her next paycheck was still weeks away. Family birthday celebrations at restaurants I'd never chosen, but somehow always paid for. I'd been systematically conditioned to be the family's financial emergency response system, trained to react quickly to crises, without asking too many questions or examining patterns too closely. "Oh, Christian, you look serious." Patricia observed her nurse's instincts picking up on my emotional state. "Everything okay?" Before I could respond, Mom jumped in with practiced smoothness. "Christian's probably just thinking about work. He's always so focused on his projects." The deflection was automatic, designed to redirect attention away from my reactions and maintain control over the narrative. But this time I wasn't going to be dismissed so easily. "Actually, I'm thinking about family dynamics," I said clearly. "Specifically about how financial expectations work in healthy relationships." The table went quiet. Derek stopped mid-chew of his expensive steak. Sarah's celebratory smile faltered slightly. "What do you mean?" Mark asked, clearly confused by the sudden shift in conversation. "I mean the difference between supporting family during genuine emergencies versus being manipulated into funding lifestyle choices I never agreed to support." Mom's face tightened with warning signals I'd learned to recognize over decades. "Christian, this is Sarah's birthday dinner. This isn't the time for one of your analytical discussions." But I was done being redirected and silenced. When exactly did I become responsible for paying for celebrations I didn't plan at restaurants? I didn't choose for guest lists. I didn't approve. The question hung in the air like smoke from an extinguished candle. Around the table, family members exchanged glances that ranged from confusion to discomfort to dawning realization. "I think there might be some misunderstanding," Casey said diplomatically. "When Mom invited us, she mentioned this was a family celebration, but she didn't specify who was hosting financially." "That's interesting," I replied, maintaining steady eye contact with Mom. "Because according to the server's behavior and everyone's ordering patterns, it seems like there was definitely a predetermined understanding about payment responsibility." Derek attempted to salvage the situation with forced casualness. "Hey man, we're all family here. Who cares about the details when we're celebrating Sarah's success?" "Sarah's success?" I couldn't keep the incredulity out of my voice. "What specific success are we celebrating? The latest acting class she rarely attends? The auditions that never materialize into actual roles? Or maybe we're celebrating her upcoming move to Los Angeles that apparently everyone knows about except me." Sarah's face went pale. "Christian, you're being mean." "I'm being honest. There's a difference, although I understand why that might be confusing in our family." Amanda shifted uncomfortably, clearly realizing she'd been used as a prop in a manipulation she didn't fully understand. "Maybe Tyler and I should pay for our own meals." We didn't realize there was family drama involved in tonight's arrangements. "There's no drama," Mom said sharply, her teacher's authority voice emerging. "Christian is just being unnecessarily complicated about a simple family celebration." "Simple?" I pulled out my phone and began calculating openly. Let's see. Champagne premium wine appetizers for 12 people, expensive entrees, additional courses. We're looking at somewhere around $3,000 to $4,000 for this simple celebration I never agreed to fund. The number landed like a physical weight on the table. Several family members looked genuinely shocked, apparently having no idea how expensive their evening of indulgence had become. "That's ridiculous," Brian said, checking his own phone calculator. "Did we really order that much?" "We did when someone else was paying," I replied pointedly. Funny how price consciousness disappears when financial responsibility is externally assigned. Tyler quietly asked Amanda for the menu, clearly calculating his own potential contribution to the evening's expenses. Mark began reviewing the wine list with new attention to the pricing column. But Mom wasn't finished with her performance. Christian Morrison: "I am disappointed in your attitude tonight. Family means supporting each other, especially during important milestones." "And what about my important milestones?" I asked. "When do we celebrate my achievements? When does anyone in this family show appreciation for my actual contributions rather than just expecting bigger ones?" The question exposed the fundamental inequality that had been obvious to everyone except me for years. My accomplishments were taken for granted while Sarah's unemployment was celebrated as artistic integrity. My financial contributions were expected, while Sarah's financial irresponsibility was excused as creative temperament. "You make good money," Sarah said defensively. "You can afford to help family." "Making good money doesn't mean I'm obligated to subsidize other people's lifestyle choices," I replied. "And helping family doesn't mean being manipulated into paying for expenses I never agreed to cover." Derek tried a different approach, appealing to masculine solidarity. "Come on, man. Don't you want to see your sister succeed? This dinner is about showing Sarah that her family believes in her dreams." "Whose dreams require other people's money?" I asked directly. "And why is my belief in Sarah measured solely by my willingness to pay for things she can't afford?" The questions were cutting through years of accumulated guilt and obligation, exposing the fundamental unfairness of expectations that had been presented as normal family dynamics. As conversations fragmented around the table, I overheard Derek speaking quietly to Uncle Mark. This dinner was Sarah's idea to test how much Christian really loves the family. If he passes tonight, we're planning to ask him to fund Sarah's move to Los Angeles next month. She needs about $10,000 for deposits and living expenses. $10,000. They weren't just planning to stick me with dinner. They were using this evening as a psychological test to determine how much additional money they could extract for Sarah's cross-country relocation to pursue acting dreams that had never produced income. The scope of their ambition was breathtaking, and the casual way Derek discussed my money, as if it were already earmarked for Sarah's purposes, revealed how completely they'd planned my financial exploitation. But this time, instead of feeling trapped by family obligations and guilt, I felt something different: emerging anger, clarity, and determination to establish boundaries that should have existed years ago. Derek's casual revelation about the $10,000 Los Angeles plan sent adrenaline coursing through my system, but I forced myself to remain calm and observant. If they'd planned this dinner as a financial test, I needed to understand the complete scope of their scheme before responding. Los Angeles is expensive, Mark was saying to Derek, apparently unaware I could hear their conversation. $10,000 might not be enough for deposits and moving expenses. Sarah's got it all calculated, Derek replied confidently. First month's rent, last month's rent security deposit, plus moving truck and initial living expenses. Christian's contribution covers the basics. Then she'll use her credit cards for furniture and car expenses. Credit cards. They were planning to leverage my money to justify additional debt spending, multiplying the financial impact beyond whatever I might contribute directly. Sarah would frame credit card debt as a temporary bridge, while pursuing acting opportunities, then inevitably need family assistance when minimum payments became unmanageable. Has she actually booked any auditions out there? Mark asked skeptically. Derek's pause was telling. She's got connections, people in the industry who recognize her talent. The vague response confirmed what I'd suspected. Sarah's Los Angeles plan was based on fantasies rather than actual opportunities. She was asking for $10,000 to fund a cross-country move without confirmed employment, reliable income prospects, or realistic backup plans. Meanwhile, at the other end of the table, Mom was conducting damage control with Patricia and Casey, trying to reframe my objections as temporary stress rather than legitimate concerns. Christian's been working so hard lately, Mom explained in the sympathetic tone she'd perfected over decades of teaching. Sometimes when people are focused on their careers, they lose sight of what really matters in life. What really matters? Patricia asked her nursing background, making her naturally attentive to emotional undercurrents. Family loyalty, understanding that success means nothing if you don't share it with the people you love. Christian's always been practical, but sometimes practicality can become selfishness if you're not careful. The psychological manipulation was expert level. Mom was reframing my financial boundaries as character flaws, while positioning Sarah's irresponsibility as virtue. Anyone who questioned this narrative would appear to be attacking family values rather than examining actual behavior patterns. Sarah's move to Los Angeles is really brave, Casey observed. It takes courage to pursue creative dreams in such a competitive environment. Exactly, Mom agreed warmly. And it takes family support to make those dreams possible. Christian has the resources to help Sarah succeed, which makes this a wonderful opportunity for him to invest in something meaningful. Invest? There was that word again applied to Sarah's unemployment and financial irresponsibility, as if they were legitimate business opportunities rather than money pits, disguised as artistic pursuits. Amanda leaned closer to Sarah, speaking quietly, but not quietly enough. Are you sure Christian's okay with funding the move? He seemed surprised when your mom mentioned Los Angeles. He'll come around, Sarah replied with practiced confidence. Christian always does the right thing for family when it matters. Tonight's dinner will remind him what family loyalty means. The circular logic was stunning. They'd created an expensive test to determine my willingness to fund an even more expensive request, then framed compliance as moral obligation rather than financial manipulation. What if he says no? Amanda pressed. He won't say no in front of everyone, Sarah answered matter-of-factly. Christian hates disappointing family in public. Once he pays for dinner tonight, asking for Los Angeles money becomes a smaller additional request. They'd analyzed my psychological patterns and designed their approach specifically to exploit my discomfort with public conflict. The dinner bill wasn't just about money. It was about establishing precedent for future requests while demonstrating my inability to resist family pressure in social settings. Tyler, who'd been quietly calculating numbers on his phone, looked genuinely concerned. Sarah, these menu prices are really high. Are you sure your brother knows what he's signing up for? Christian makes 6 figures, Derek answered for Sarah. He can afford one expensive dinner for his sister's birthday. 6 figures doesn't mean unlimited money, Tyler replied reasonably, especially if there are other expenses being planned. Amanda shot him a warning look, clearly uncomfortable with questioning the evening's financial arrangements. But Tyler's practical concerns were highlighting the fundamental unfairness of expectations that had been normalized through repetition. As I processed these conversations, I noticed the server approaching with dessert menus and additional wine recommendations. The meal was entering its final phase, which meant the bill would arrive soon, along with the moment of truth everyone was anticipating. But before that confrontation, I needed to understand something else. I excused myself again this time, heading toward the restaurant's front entrance where I could make a private phone call. I dialed my bank's customer service line and checked my account balance, wanting to confirm my exact financial position before making any decisions about tonight's expenses. The automated system confirmed what I already knew. I had enough savings to cover the dinner bill without financial hardship, which wasn't the issue at all. The real issue was precedent. If I paid tonight's bill without resistance, I would be confirming Sarah and Mom's assessment that public family pressure could override my personal financial boundaries. I would be proving that guilt and manipulation were effective tools for accessing my bank account. As I ended the call, I overheard the hostess speaking to the restaurant manager near the front podium. The large table in Section 12 specifically requested that we ensure the gentleman in the blue shirt receives the check when it's time. They said he's hosting the celebration. The gentleman in the blue shirt, that would be me. They hadn't just planned to stick me with the bill. They'd actively coordinated with restaurant staff to ensure I couldn't deflect payment responsibility even if I tried. The level of premeditation was staggering. This wasn't spontaneous family dysfunction or miscommunication about payment expectations. This was a carefully orchestrated financial ambush designed to extract maximum money while minimizing my ability to refuse. When I returned to the table, dessert orders were in progress. Despite having consumed enough food to feed a small village, everyone was enthusiastically selecting additional courses that would push the final bill toward astronomical territory. Christian, Mom called out cheerfully. Perfect timing. We were just deciding on desserts and after-dinner drinks. The server says they have an excellent cognac selection. After-dinner drinks, cognac selection. They were actively working to inflate the bill as high as possible, knowing that each additional expense would be my responsibility to cover. I'll pass on dessert, I said, settling back into my chair. But don't let me stop anyone else from ordering whatever they'd like. Come on, Derek urged. It's a celebration. Live a little. Live a little. With other people's money while contributing nothing to the expenses except manipulation and guilt-tripping designed to ensure payment compliance. Sarah ordered the chocolate souffle with vanilla bean ice cream and raspberry coulis. Mom selected the creme brulee with fresh berries. Derek chose the tiramisu and added an aged scotch to accompany it. Around the table, everyone continued ordering with the enthusiasm of people who'd never be held accountable for their consumption. As the server tallied the additional dessert and drink orders, I realized this was no longer about birthday celebration or family bonding. This had become a systematic test of how much financial abuse I would tolerate in exchange for family acceptance that had never actually been unconditional. The server disappeared to prepare desserts, while everyone settled in for the final act of their elaborate performance. Soon the bill would arrive, cameras would be ready, and I would face the choice that would define my relationship with my family for years to come. But for the first time in my adult life, I knew exactly what I was going to do. The desserts arrived with the same theatrical presentation that had characterized the entire evening. Sarah's chocolate souffle came with a sparkler and birthday candle, prompting another round of photos and celebration that felt increasingly hollow, given what I now understood about the evening's true purpose. Mom raised her cognac glass for yet another toast. To Sarah's bright future in Los Angeles and to the family that makes dreams possible. The toast was perfectly timed to create maximum pressure for my compliance when the bill arrived. Everyone was now emotionally invested in Sarah's Los Angeles narrative, making any objection from me appear to be crushing family dreams rather than protecting my financial boundaries. Derek continued documenting everything on his phone, clearly planning to use the footage to pressure me if I showed any resistance to payment. The visual evidence of family celebration would make refusing to pay appear selfish and mean-spirited rather than reasonable financial boundary setting. "Christian," Amanda said warmly, "it's really beautiful how your family supports each other's dreams. Tyler and I were just saying how rare it is to see siblings be so generous with each other." The comment was clearly designed to reinforce expectations while creating social pressure from outside the immediate family circle. If Tyler and Amanda believed I was naturally generous with family financial support, questioning the dinner bill would contradict their positive impression of my character. "Generosity works best when it's voluntary rather than assumed," I replied carefully. Casey looked puzzled by my response. "What do you mean?" "I mean that healthy relationships involve communication about expectations rather than surprise assignments of financial responsibility." "Oh, come on," Brian said dismissively. "It's just dinner between family. Why overthink it?" Just dinner. A $3,000 to $4,000 dinner that I'd never agreed to host at a restaurant I hadn't chosen for a guest list I hadn't approved in celebration of plans I'd never been consulted about. The server appeared beside our table with the leather check folder, his professional demeanor masking what must have been anticipation about the tip percentage on such a substantial bill. He placed the folder directly in front of me, exactly as the restaurant staff had been instructed to do. Every conversation at the table stopped. 12 pairs of eyes focused on me with varying degrees of expectation, curiosity, and anticipation. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. My demonstration of family loyalty measured in thousands of dollars. I opened the folder slowly, letting everyone see the total amount before I reacted. $3,470.36. The number was even higher than my worst estimates, representing several months of my discretionary income for a single evening I'd never wanted to fund. The silence stretched for long seconds as everyone waited for my predictable compliance with their expectations. Mom's face showed confident anticipation. Sarah looked nervous, but hopeful. Derek kept his phone ready to capture my reaction. I closed the folder carefully, then picked it up and slid it across the table directly to Mom. "I believe this belongs to you," I said clearly. "Since you organized the celebration, chose the restaurant, invited the guests, and made all the arrangements." The words cut through the room's atmosphere like breaking glass. Mom's confident expression shattered into confusion and growing alarm. "Christian, what are you doing?" she asked, her voice carrying the tone she'd used to control my behavior since childhood. "I'm declining to pay for an event I didn't plan, at a restaurant I didn't choose, for expenses I never agreed to cover," I replied calmly. "But you always pay," Sarah said, as if stating an obvious fact that couldn't be disputed. "I always have paid," I corrected. Past behavior doesn't create future obligations, especially when that behavior was the result of manipulation rather than voluntary generosity. Derek attempted to salvage the situation with forced reasonableness. "Look, man, we're all family here. Can't we just split this however makes sense?" That would make sense, I agreed. Adult family members taking responsibility for their own food and drink choices instead of assuming someone else will cover their expenses. The suggestion created immediate panic around the table as people realized they'd ordered far beyond their financial capacity to pay. Patricia and Mark exchanged worried glances. Casey and Brian looked genuinely alarmed. Amanda whispered something urgent to Tyler. Christian Mom said, her voice taking on the manipulative sweetness that had worked so effectively throughout my childhood. This is Sarah's special birthday. Surely family means more to you than money. Family does mean more to me than money, I replied, which is why I'm disappointed that my family has been treating me like a financial resource rather than a person deserving of respect and consideration. That's not fair, Sarah protested, tears beginning to form in her eyes. We appreciate everything you do for us. Appreciation involves gratitude, not entitlement. Appreciation means asking rather than assuming. Appreciation doesn't include planning elaborate schemes to manipulate me into paying for things I never agreed to fund. What schemes? Mom demanded, but her defensive tone confirmed she knew exactly what I was referring to. I pulled out my phone and began reading directly from Sarah's text messages. Remember, if he objects, remind him about family loyalty in front of everyone. He won't make a scene in public. The table erupted in shocked reactions as I continued reading their planning messages. Derek thinks we should aim for at least $3,000. That should cover dinner plus set up the expectation for LA moving expenses. You went through my phone, Sarah shrieked, but her outrage couldn't disguise the fact that her manipulation had been exposed completely. You left it unlocked next to your purse, I replied. Just like you left your true intentions exposed through weeks of planning to exploit my discomfort with public confrontation. Mark looked genuinely appalled. You planned this whole evening to trick Christian into paying. It's not tricking, Mom said desperately. It's family helping family when someone has the means to contribute. It's fraud, Tyler said quietly. Deliberate deception to obtain money under false pretenses. His legal perspective cut through the family loyalty rhetoric, revealing the situation for what it actually was. Systematic financial exploitation disguised as celebration. Christian doesn't have to fund Sarah's lifestyle, Patricia said firmly, her nurse's directness overriding family politeness. And manipulating him into expensive payments is completely inappropriate. Thank you, I said, grateful for her support. I'm happy to help family during genuine emergencies, but I won't be manipulated into funding irresponsible financial decisions or subsidizing unemployment disguised as artistic integrity. Derek tried one last appeal to masculine obligation. She's your sister, man. Don't you want to help her succeed? Success isn't something you fund, I replied. It's something you earn. And helping family doesn't mean eliminating all consequences for their choices or all responsibility for their expenses. The server returned clearly uncomfortable with the family drama unfolding around his restaurant's bill. Is there anything I can help clarify about tonight's charges? Yes, I said clearly. Please split the bill among all the adults who are capable of paying for their own meals. I can't afford my portion, Derek admitted, panic creeping into his voice. Then you shouldn't have ordered beyond your means, I replied without sympathy. Mom's face was cycling through anger, desperation, and dawning realization that her manipulation had backfired completely. Christian, if you leave us with this bill, you're destroying your relationship with your family. If paying restaurant bills is the only foundation for my family relationships, then those relationships were never worth preserving, I answered. You're being selfish and cruel, Sarah sobbed dramatically. I'm being honest and setting boundaries that should have existed years ago, I corrected. Mark cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable but determined to do the right thing. Patricia and I can cover our portion, plus Casey and Brian's meals. We should never have assumed someone else was paying for our celebration. Tyler and I insist on paying for ourselves too, Amanda said quickly. "We're really sorry about the misunderstanding." Mom looked around the table desperately, realizing that reasonable adults were taking responsibility for their own expenses rather than enabling her manipulation scheme. "Fine," she said, her voice cracking with defeat and fury. "But don't expect your family to forget how you abandoned us when we needed support." "I haven't abandoned anyone," I replied calmly. "I've simply stopped allowing myself to be exploited under the guise of family loyalty. There's a significant difference." As the server began preparing separate checks for the responsible adults, Sarah delivered one final emotional manipulation attempt. "Christian, please, I'm sorry about the planning. I just really need help with Los Angeles. This is my chance to make something of myself." Her tears were genuine, but so was my resolve. "Sarah, you're 25 years old. It's time to make something of yourself using your own resources and efforts rather than family subsidies that prevent you from developing independence and financial responsibility." The conversation was over. For the first time in my adult life, I had established clear boundaries about family financial manipulation and refused to be guilted into compliance with unreasonable expectations. The bill got divided among the people who could actually afford to pay for their expensive dining choices, with Sarah and Derek grudgingly covering their portion using credit cards they could barely afford. Mom sat in furious silence as her manipulation scheme collapsed around her. But instead of feeling guilty or conflicted about my stand, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: self-respect, clarity, and freedom from the emotional blackmail that had controlled my financial decisions for far too long. The aftermath of my stand transformed our family dinner into a sobering lesson about consequences, responsibility, and the difference between genuine support and enablement. As separate checks were distributed and individual payments processed, the atmosphere shifted from celebration to uncomfortable accountability. Sarah and Derek struggled, share with their portion of the bill, maxing out credit cards and arguing quietly about their financial recklessness. The reality of paying for their own expensive choices created immediate stress that highlighted how completely they'd relied on my anticipated subsidization of their lifestyle. Mom sat in stony silence, processing the collapse of her manipulation strategy and the realization that emotional blackmail had lost its effectiveness. For perhaps the first time in our relationship, she was confronting the fact that I wouldn't accept financial exploitation disguised as family loyalty. Mark and Patricia handled their payment with grace, privately apologizing for their inadvertent participation in the manipulation scheme. "We honestly thought this was a normal family celebration," Patricia explained quietly. "If we'd known about the planning and expectations, we never would have participated." "Neither would Casey or Brian," Mark added. "Teaching kids that family support means financial exploitation sets them up for dysfunctional relationships throughout their lives." Their perspective provided validation I hadn't realized I needed. Reasonable adults recognized the manipulation for what it was once the deception was exposed, confirming that my boundaries were appropriate rather than selfish. Amanda and Tyler paid their portion quickly, clearly embarrassed by their unwitting role as accomplices in the financial ambush. "Sarah made it sound like you were excited to treat everyone," Amanda explained apologetically. "She said family celebrations were important to you, and money wasn't an issue." "Money isn't the issue," I clarified. "Honesty and respect are the issues. I'm happy to contribute to genuine celebrations when I'm asked rather than manipulated." The server processed payments efficiently, clearly accustomed to handling awkward family financial situations at upscale establishments. His professional demeanor couldn't entirely mask relief that the drama was resolving into actual payment rather than escalating into police involvement. As we prepared to leave the restaurant, Sarah made one final emotional appeal. "Christian, I know tonight went wrong, but I really do need help with Los Angeles. Can't we talk about this privately?" "We can talk," I agreed, "but the conversation will be about you developing realistic financial plans rather than me funding unrealistic dreams." "What does that mean?" she asked, hope creeping into her voice. "It means you need a job savings and genuine opportunities before moving across the country. It means taking responsibility for your own success rather than expecting family subsidies to eliminate the risks of your choices." Derek stepped forward aggressively. "So you're just going to let your sister's dreams die because you're obsessed with money?" "I'm going to let my sister grow up," I replied calmly. "Dreams that require other people's money aren't dreams. They're fantasies. Real dreams motivate you to work harder and sacrifice your own resources to achieve them." The distinction cut through their entitlement rhetoric, exposing the fundamental difference between supporting genuine ambition and enabling irresponsible escapism. Over the following weeks, the family dynamics shifted dramatically as everyone adjusted to the new reality of clearly defined boundaries. Sarah was forced to confront her financial situation honestly for the first time in years, discovering that her Los Angeles plans were built on credit card debt and unrealistic expectations rather than actual opportunities. Without my anticipated funding, she couldn't afford the cross-country move she'd been planning. Instead of pursuing impossible dreams in California, she focused on local opportunities that could provide actual income while developing professional skills. Sarah found steady employment at a marketing firm that valued creativity, but required consistent performance and measurable results. The job wasn't glamorous, but it provided health insurance, retirement benefits, and opportunities for advancement based on merit, rather than family subsidies. Mom initially maintained resentment about my refusal to fund Sarah's lifestyle, but gradually began recognizing how her favoritism had prevented Sarah from developing independence and responsibility. "I was trying to protect her dreams," she admitted during a difficult conversation several months later. "You were protecting her from reality," I replied. "Dreams that can't survive contact with real-world constraints aren't worth protecting." Our relationship slowly improved as Mom learned to appreciate my contributions without demanding additional ones. She began acknowledging my achievements instead of taking them for granted and stopped comparing my practical success unfavorably to Sarah's unemployed artistic purity. The most significant change was in my own self-perception and confidence. Standing up to family manipulation had required courage I wasn't sure I possessed, but the experience taught me valuable lessons about self-respect and healthy relationships. I learned that enabling irresponsible behavior doesn't help people. It prevents them from developing the skills and character necessary for genuine success. True family support means encouraging responsibility rather than eliminating consequences. I discovered that my worth wasn't determined by my willingness to pay for other people's choices, and that relationships based primarily on financial contributions aren't worth preserving. Healthy family bonds involve mutual respect, honest communication, and shared responsibility, rather than one-sided exploitation. Most importantly, I realized that setting boundaries doesn't make you selfish. It teaches others how to treat you with dignity and forces them to engage authentically rather than manipulatively. Sarah eventually thanked me for forcing her to develop independence. "I hated you for months after that dinner," she admitted honestly. "But learning to support myself has been more satisfying than any family bailout ever was." Supporting yourself builds confidence that no amount of borrowed money can provide, I agreed. You're stronger now because you know you can handle challenges independently. Our sibling relationship became healthier once it was based on genuine affection rather than financial dependency. Sarah's respect for me increased dramatically when she realized I cared enough about her growth to risk family conflict by refusing to enable her irresponsibility. Derek disappeared from Sarah's life once family money was no longer available to fund his lifestyle ambitions. His absence confirmed that his interest had been financial rather than romantic, protecting Sarah from a relationship built on exploitation rather than genuine partnership. The experience taught our entire family about the difference between helping and enabling, between support and manipulation, between love and emotional blackmail. Relationships improved significantly once everyone learned to engage honestly rather than strategically. Looking back, that expensive dinner became the catalyst for healthier family dynamics, improved self-respect, and relationships based on mutual appreciation rather than financial obligation. Standing up for myself was terrifying in the moment, but transformative in its long-term impact. The most profound lesson was understanding that true family support means believing in someone enough to let them face challenges independently, rather than rescuing them from every consequence of their choices. Real love sometimes requires saying no to requests that would prevent growth and character development. My financial boundaries didn't destroy family relationships. They saved them by forcing everyone to engage authentically rather than manipulatively. The family dinner that nearly cost me $4,000 ultimately gave me something much more valuable: self-respect, healthy relationships, and the confidence to protect my own well-being while genuinely supporting others. Family loyalty isn't about unlimited financial availability. It's about caring enough to encourage responsibility, growth, and independence, rather than dependency and entitlement. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable behavior that prevents someone from becoming their best self. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where family expectations crossed the line from support into financial manipulation? How do you balance helping loved ones with maintaining healthy boundaries? What would you have done if you were sitting at that restaurant table with a $4,000 bill and everyone expecting you to pay? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your perspective on family financial boundaries and how you've handled similar situations. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more content about setting healthy boundaries and building stronger relationships. And if you know someone who might benefit from hearing about family financial dynamics, please share this story with them. Thank you for listening, and remember, true family support means encouraging growth and responsibility, not unlimited financial availability.